13 roads. Here is a tale I have not yet forgotten. Listen. Tonight it is the year the Bone Riders knocked at every door, and every house without a black iron mark on the lintel had a death before the year was out. Without exception, without explanation, and without a single living soul who remembers making the marks. I was 7 years old that year. I remember the sound. Not a fist, never a fist. A single knuckle, laid against the wood 3 times, evenly spaced. The way a man knocks who is certain he will not be refused. I heard it from underneath my bed, where my mother had put me before she blew out the lamp, and I heard her breathing stop in the dark the same way a candle stops, not gradually, but all at once. The mark was already on our lintel. I did not know that then. I only knew the knocking stopped and did not come again that night, and that my mother did not sleep for the remaining hours of darkness. I have spent 40 years trying to understand what I heard. I'm not certain I want to finish. What I can tell you is this. Across the entire lowland basin, 7 counties, 4 river valleys, approximately 2,000 separate households, the riders walked every road and lane between the first frost and the last day of that same winter. No village was skipped, no farmstead too remote, no house too mean or too grand to warrant a visit. The season of the knocking lasted exactly 112 days, and when it ended, the accounting began. The accounting was simple. Every house that bore the black iron mark on its lintel, a mark that looked like a brand, like something pressed into the wood while still hot, the shape of a recurved spine, a column of vertebrae curved into a question, was passed by. No death came to it inside the year that followed. Every house without the mark had a death, every single one. I did not see a bone rider clearly until I was grown, but I will tell you what I saw through the gap beneath my bedroom door the night they came to the village of Cressfall, which is the village where I was born. A light preceded them. Not a lantern, nothing so ordinary. It was the light that bone makes when you hold it against a flame. Thin, yellowish, slightly translucent, as if the darkness itself had been stretched over a candle. It moved at walking pace, and it cast no shadows. That is the thing that caught in my chest, even at 7 years old, though I had no language for it then. Every light casts shadows. This one did not. The room simply became slightly less dark on one side, and the shapes of things, the chair, the table leg, the hem of my mother's nightdress, did not shift or elongate. They stayed where they were, as if the light had no opinion about them. Then the knock, 3 times, even, patient. My mother stood perfectly still in the dark for what felt to me like a very long time. I know now it was perhaps 4 seconds. Then the light moved on. It did not hurry, it did not linger. It simply moved, the way a man moves when he has a list and is proceeding down it. I heard it knock at the next house along the lane, and the next. By the time it reached the mill at the far end of Cressfall, I had counted 14 knocks. We had 16 houses. The other 2 had the mark. 14 families. 14 deaths before the snow was off the ground in spring. I knew old Petra Koss, the laundress, by her laugh before I knew her face. She was one of the 14. She outlasted the winter, went in late February, a fever that took her in 3 days. I remember carrying water up the lane to her daughter's house and not understanding at 7 why the adults around me had stopped being surprised. Why my mother said, when she heard, only, "That's the last of them then," and sat down and was quiet for a long time. It was not the last of them, not everywhere. In the county of Marin, to the south, the accounting ran through the following autumn. 2 villages there lost entire family lines, not just one member, but the thread of a name going back 5 generations, cut at every branch within the 12-month window. The Colwick family, the Dray. I mention them because they deserve to be mentioned, because they were people with names and kitchens and habits and debts. And now they are data in the accounting. And that is a failure I want to resist for as long as I can. The question every survivor asked, the question I have been asking since I was old enough to form it properly, is this: who made the marks? The ironwork was consistent. Every mark across every county, every village, every isolated farmhouse in the river bottoms. The same recurved spine, the same dimensions, roughly the width of a man's palm and the length of his middle finger. Not painted, not scratched. Pressed into the wood, the grain compressed and darkened the way grain goes when something very hot has been laid against it. Except there was no scorching, no char, no smell of burning wood that anyone reported. The wood simply bore the impression, as if it had always been there, as if the door had grown that way. Blacksmiths were asked. Across 14 villages, I have found record of 17 separate inquiries made to local smiths, whether they had been contracted to make such marks, whether they had sold the tool that made them. Not one smith had any knowledge of it. Not one could replicate the mark, though several tried. The closest any of them came was a brand made from wound wire that produced something similar in shape but wrong in character. The branded wood smelled, charred at the edges, looked punished rather than chosen. The marks did not look punished. They looked, and I choose this word with full awareness of how strange it is, they looked consensual, as if the house had agreed to receive them. I spent 3 winters collecting testimony. Old women who had been young that year, men who had been children as I had been and were now grandfathers, and who went quiet in the same particular way when the subject came up. Not reluctance exactly, but the quiet of a person revisiting a room they were not certain they had the right to enter. What I found in those testimonies was something that I was not prepared for, and that I have not been able to resolve. No one made the marks. Not no one who would admit it. Not no one who survived. No one. Full stop. Of the families who bore the mark and lived, who sat behind their closed doors and heard the knocking pass them by, not one could account for the mark's origin. I interviewed, personally, 63 survivors from marked households. 63 people who owed their lives, or the lives of their parents, to that recurved spine pressed into the lintel wood. 63 people who had no memory of placing it there, hiring someone to place it there, or waking to find it newly made. It was simply present. It had always been present. And when pressed, when I sat across from them at their kitchen tables with my notebook open and asked them directly, has it occurred to you that it could not always have been there, that someone or something must have made it? Every one of them went to that same quiet room, and every one of them, eventually, said some version of the same sentence. I don't think it was for me to know. There is a second thing in the testimonies, harder to account for, which is why I have saved it. 8 of the 63 survivors reported the same additional detail, unprompted, across distances of 40 miles and 40 years. 8 people who had never met each other, who had spent their lives in separate valleys, who had no mechanism for coordinating a story. 8 people who said that on the night the knocking came, they had the distinct impression, not a dream, they were all careful to say, not a dream, that someone had already been inside the house. Not recently, not that night, but recently enough, within a season, moving quietly, touching nothing, standing for a long time in the dark of each room, as if memorizing the inhabitants, as if deciding who would be marked and who would not. I do not know what makes a house worthy of a mark. I have looked for patterns across the 63 with the same obsessive attention a man gives a problem he cannot let go of and cannot solve. Age of the household, wealth, occupation, number of children, debts, crimes, acts of charity, kinship lines. I found nothing. The marked houses were poor and rich, guilty and blameless, full of children and empty of them. The oldest house in Cressfall was marked. So was a farmstead built the year before the knocking, so new the wood was still pale, still smelled of cut timber. The mark looked as old on that pale door as it did on any other. The riders themselves. I have told you I did not see one clearly until I was grown. The grown man's sighting was not on the Bone Road. It was on the road that borders 2 of the 13, in a place where the edges of things are less fixed. And I will not reconstruct that encounter in full tonight, because it is not what this accounting is about. But I will tell you what I saw, because the physical description belongs here, in the record. Tall. Taller than any man I have known, but proportioned as a man, not distorted, not monstrous in the way that fear manufactures monsters. Mounted on a horse that moved without sound, its hooves placing themselves with the careful deliberateness of an animal navigating ice, though the ground was dry. Dressed in layers that might have been traveling clothes, a long coat or robes, it was difficult to determine which, because they did not move with the wind the way fabric should. They moved with the rider's breathing, slowly in, slowly out, as if the garments were alive in the same way lungs are alive. The face, I did not see the face. Not because it was hidden, not because of a hood or a cowl. There was simply a moment when my eyes moved toward the face and then were somewhere else, and I could not account for the transit, like missing the step at the bottom of a dark staircase. My eyes knew somehow that the face was not for me, that the face was in the same category as the marks, not mine to know. The faceless rider is what they are called in the oldest records I have found. Not named, not shown, not absent. Present in the way a word is present in a sentence before you understand the sentence. I found the name in a merchant's ledger from a town 3 counties east of Cressfall, an annotation in the margin of a winter inventory. Riders came again, faceless as always, left marks. 3 families unprotected. God keep them. The merchant's name was Aldrich Soor. He wrote it in the matter-of-fact register of a man noting weather or the price of salt, as if it were a thing that happened, as it happened, and life continued around it. I have read that margin note perhaps 40 times. I keep returning to the as always, as if it had happened to Aldrich Soor before, in a previous winter, or in a winter before that. As if the knocking was not a singular year, but a cycle with an interval too long for any one lifetime to contain more than one pass of it. I was a child the year it came to Cressfall. I will be an old man if it comes again. My lintel is marked. I checked it this morning, as I check it every morning, the way a man checks that a door he is not certain he locked is in fact locked. The mark is still there, still the recurved spine, still that compressed, unchanged quality, as if the wood has been carrying it since before I was born. I do not know what happens if it fades. I do not know what happens to people who were born after the marks were made. Whether the mark covers the children, the grandchildren, the stranger who buys the house a generation from now and has no knowledge of what the impression in the lintel wood means. I have one testimony from a woman who moved into a marked house as an adult, who knew nothing of the accounting, who lived 20 years in that house and heard nothing, noticed nothing, suffered nothing. And I have one testimony from a man who inherited a marked house, knew its history, and moved away before he was 40 because he could not sleep in it. Moved to a house with an unmarked lintel in a county that had been outside the rider's passage that year. He died within 12 months of the move. His daughter told me this. She was matter-of-fact about it, the same register as Aldrich Soor, as if cause and effect were obvious and only the interval needed noting. He left the mark behind. Here is the thing that has stayed with me longest, stayed with me across 40 years, across 63 interviews, across all the merchant ledgers and parish death records and half-legible testimonies of old people who went quiet at a particular kind of question. It is not the riders, it is not the marks, it is not even the accounting, though the accounting is the thing that bears witness to all of it. It is my mother, standing in the dark of our house in Cressfall, not sleeping, breathing, eventually, again. Her back to the window, her hands at her sides. On the night the knocking came and passed us by, she never spoke of it to me. Not once, in all the years I knew her. Not when I was old enough to ask. Not when I made my work known to her, and she understood what I was collecting. She never denied it. She never confirmed it. She simply, on the one occasion I came closest to raising it directly, put her hand over mine on the table and said, "The mark was there when I moved into that house. I have never asked why." And that was all. She died at 81, in that house, in the bed she had slept in for 60 years, with the mark still pressed into the wood above the front door. A quiet death, expected. The kind of death that feels, next to what happened on the other side of those 14 lanes in Cressfall, almost like a mercy, extended from somewhere that does not traffic in mercy as a rule. I do not know who the riders serve. I do not know the logic of the marking, or whether logic is even the right category for it. I know the accounting. I know the numbers. I know the smell of a house that has been listening, and the particular silence of a village in the weeks after the knocking passes, when every family knows which of their neighbors was not protected, and no one can think of anything adequate to say about it. I have walked the Bone Road more times than I have had cause to. You learn things on it, not answers. The road is not interested in your questions, but you learn to read it, the way you learn to read the weather, not predicting it, only knowing, when the light changes, that a change is coming. There is a road called the Ashen Road that runs adjacent to the Bone Road at its northern terminus, and the travelers who walk it carry a different kind of accounting, not death, not marks on lintels, something older and harder to describe, and I have met two people who walked it and will not speak of what they carried back. One of them had eyes the color of ash after a fire goes cold. She sat across from me in a way station and drank her water and said exactly one thing before she left. "Whatever you are looking for on the Bone Road, look faster. The ashen ones don't knock." I did not sleep well after that. I check my lintel every morning. The mark is still there. For now.